What would you do if the man you've been bathing, feeding, and caring for like a helpless child for 3 years suddenly stood up from his wheelchair and walked into your bedroom at midnight? What if everything you believed was a lie? And what if, despite the betrayal burning through your chest, your heart still raced at the sight of him standing there in the dark, watching you with eyes that had never truly been broken? Before we dive into this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another Afro-Korean story. Trust me, you're going to want to stay until the very end of this one because nothing is what it seems. The clock on her nightstand read 12:17 when Petra's eyes flew open. She didn't know what woke her at first. The Seoul night was quiet, the mansion still, and the only sound was the soft hum of the heating system pushing warmth through the December cold. Then she heard it again. A footstep. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming from the hallway. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she sat up slowly, clutching her blanket to her chest. In 3 years of living in this house, she had never heard footsteps at this hour. The staff left by 9. The guards patrolled outside. And Kang Jae-won, her patient, the man she had dedicated every waking moment to caring for, was paralyzed from the waist down. He couldn't walk. The door handle turned. Petra stopped breathing. The door swung open, and the silhouette of a man filled her doorway. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Standing on 2 perfectly functional legs. Moonlight spilled through her window and illuminated his face, and Petra felt her entire world shatter into a million pieces. Kang Jae-won stood there, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes she had spent 3 years learning to read. His jaw was tight. His hands were clenched at his sides. And he was standing. Walking. Moving like a man who had never spent a single day in a wheelchair. Jae-won. His name came out as a broken whisper. He didn't answer. He just stood there, drinking in the sight of her like a man who had been dying of thirst and finally found water. You can walk, she breathed, and then the shock gave way to something else. Something hot and furious that exploded in her chest. You can walk. She threw off her blanket and launched herself out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold floor as she stormed toward him. 3 years. 3 years of bathing him. Dressing him. Lifting his legs onto the bed. Massaging muscles she was told would atrophy without her care. 3 years of tears she'd cried in private when she thought about how unfair life was, how cruel fate had been to such a powerful man. All of it was a lie. Her hand connected with his face before she could stop herself. The slap echoed through the silent room, and Jae-won's head barely moved. He took it. He took it like he knew he deserved it. 3 years. Petra's voice cracked as hot tears spilled down her cheeks. I gave you 3 years of my life. I fed you. I bathed you. I held your hand when you pretended to have nightmares. And the whole time you could walk. Jae-won caught her wrist when she tried to slap him again, his grip firm but not painful. This close, she could smell him. The same cedar and sandalwood she had grown to associate with safety. With home. With feelings she had buried so deep she thought they would never surface. Let me explain, he said, and his voice was different now. Stronger. There was a command in it that she had never heard before. The voice of a man used to being obeyed. The voice of a king. Explain what? Petra yanked her wrist free. Explain how you made a fool out of me. Explain how you watched me dedicate my life to taking care of you while you were perfectly fine. I was never fine, Jae-won said quietly. And you were never a fool. You were the only thing keeping me alive. Petra laughed bitterly, swiping at her tears. That's rich coming from the man who's been lying to me since the day I walked through that door. Sit down, Jae-won said. No. Petra. The way he said her name made her pause. In 3 years, she had never heard him say it like that. Like it was a prayer. Like it was the only word that mattered. Please. Sit down and let me tell you the truth. After that, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. I'll give you enough money to never work again. I'll give you anything you want. But please, just hear me out. She should leave. She should pack her bags right now and walk out of this mansion and never look back. But something in his eyes, something raw and desperate, made her feet move backward until her legs hit the edge of the bed and she sat. Jae-won closed the door behind him and leaned against it, keeping his distance like he knew he had no right to be close to her anymore. 3 years ago, he began, I was the head of the Kong family. We control everything in Seoul. Shipping. Real estate. Politics. Everything that moves through this city, moves through us. I had enemies. Too many to count. But the one enemy I never expected was my own brother. Petra's breath caught. In 3 years, no one had ever mentioned a brother. Kang Min-jun, Jae-won continued, and his voice hardened on the name. My younger brother. The one I protected. The one I raised after our parents died. The one I trusted with my life. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. He's the reason I ended up in that wheelchair. What do you mean? Jae-won's jaw tightened. He shot me in the back and left me for dead in a warehouse fire. He took everything. The organization. The money. The power. And he told everyone I was dead. Petra pressed her hand to her mouth. Oh my God. I should have died that night. The bullet grazed my spine. The doctor said I might never walk again. But I had one thing my brother didn't count on. I had people who were still loyal to me. They got me out. They brought me here. And they told me the only way to survive was to make everyone believe I was broken beyond repair. So you pretended to be paralyzed, Petra said slowly. For the first year, I wasn't pretending. The injury was real. But I healed. Slowly. Painfully. I went through physical therapy in secret, at night, when the house was asleep. And then I kept pretending because I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't strong enough to take back what was mine. And me? Petra's voice shook. Where do I fit into all of this? Jae-won was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. You were supposed to be just a caregiver. Someone to maintain the facade. Someone who would take care of my body while I healed my soul. He looked at her then, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart stutter. But you became so much more than that, Petra. You became the reason I wanted to heal. The reason I wanted to live. The reason I couldn't let my brother win. Petra shook her head. Don't. Don't say things like that to me. Not after everything you've done. It's the truth, Jae-won said. Every word of it. The truth? Petra stood up, her anger returning. You want to talk about truth? Here's the truth, Jae-won. I am a black woman from Baltimore who came to Korea because I had nothing left back home. No family. No future. Nothing but a nursing degree and a dream of starting over somewhere nobody knew my name. And then I got this job. This insane, unbelievable job that paid more money than I had ever seen in my life to take care of one man. And I thought it was fate. I thought God was finally giving me something good. But it was all a lie. Your feelings weren't a lie, Jae-won said. Petra froze. What? He pushed off the door and took a step toward her. Then another. Each step deliberate. Each step bringing him closer until he was standing right in front of her, looking down at her with those dark eyes that had haunted her dreams for years. I felt it, he said quietly. Every time you touched me. Every time you looked at me when you thought I was asleep. Every time you talked to me like I was worth something even when you thought I couldn't feel anything below my waist. He reached out and touched her face, and Petra hated herself for leaning into his palm. I felt everything, Petra. And I felt you falling for me the same way I was falling for you. That's not fair, she whispered. None of this is fair, Jae-won agreed. I'm a man who was betrayed by his own blood. A man who spent 3 years pretending to be helpless while the woman he loved took care of him like a child. A man who watched you cry over me and couldn't tell you that every tear you shed broke me more than any bullet ever could. His thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking for it anyway. Petra closed her eyes. Her heart was at war with her head. Everything logical told her to run. To leave this man and his lies and his dangerous world behind. But her heart, her stupid, traitorous heart, wanted nothing more than to stay in the warmth of his touch. Why tonight? She asked, opening her eyes. Why are you telling me this now? Jae-won's expression darkened. Because Min-jun found out I'm alive. He's coming for me. And I won't be able to protect you if you don't know the truth. A chill ran down Petra's spine. What do you mean he's coming for you? I mean that by this time next week, this house will be surrounded by men who want me dead. And anyone who's been close to me will be a target. Jae-won gripped her shoulders. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know. And because if you want to run, you need to run now. Tonight. Before it's too late. Petra searched his face. And if I don't want to run? Something flickered in Jae-won's eyes. Hope. Desperate, aching hope. Then you stay, he said. And you fight beside me. I'm a nurse, Petra said. I don't know anything about fighting. You know how to keep people alive. In the world I come from, that's the most valuable skill there is. Petra thought about the life waiting for her back in America. The empty apartment. The dead-end jobs. The loneliness that had followed her like a shadow for as long as she could remember. And then she thought about this man standing in front of her. Broken and betrayed and still somehow standing. Still somehow fighting. If I stay, she said carefully, you never lie to me again. About anything. Ever. Done. And you tell me everything. About your world. About your enemies. About what we're up against. Done. And if at any point I want to leave, you let me go. No questions asked. Jae-won hesitated. She could see the struggle on his face, the war between his desire to keep her and his promise to be honest. Done, he said finally. But I'll spend every moment until then making sure you never want to leave. Petra should have been afraid. She should have been terrified. But standing there in the moonlight with Kang Jae-won looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, she felt something else entirely. She felt alive. The next morning came too soon. Petra woke to the sound of voices downstairs, unfamiliar and urgent. She had barely slept after Jae-won left her room, her mind racing with everything he had told her. Now, as she dressed quickly and made her way to the main floor, she found herself stepping into a world she had only glimpsed the edges of for 3 years. The grand living room that she had cleaned and maintained every day was now filled with men in dark suits. They stood in clusters, speaking in rapid Korean that Petra could barely follow despite her years of practice. At the center of them all sat Jae-won, no longer in his wheelchair but in a leather armchair that looked more like a throne. He looked different this morning. Harder. Colder. The tender man who had touched her face in the moonlight was gone, replaced by someone who radiated power and danger. When he saw her at the bottom of the stairs, something softened in his expression. Just for a moment. Just enough for her to know that last night hadn't been a dream. Everyone out, Jae-won said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The men exchanged glances but obeyed immediately, filing out of the room until only Jae-won and Petra remained. You stayed, he said. I said I would. Jae-won rose from his chair and crossed to her, moving with a grace she had never seen before. The limp was gone. The weakness was gone. Everything about him screamed predator, and Petra wondered how she had ever believed he was prey. How much Korean did you understand? He asked. Enough to know that someone named Park is dead and someone named Lee is ready to move. Jae-won's eyebrow rose. Your Korean has improved. I had a good teacher. She had spent countless hours talking to him, practicing phrases, never knowing he understood every word perfectly. Although apparently he was holding out on me. A ghost of a smile crossed Jae-won's face. Park was one of my brother's most trusted lieutenants. His death means Min-jun is feeling threatened. When a man like my brother feels threatened, he makes mistakes. And Lee Sung-ho. He was my father's right hand before he was mine. He stayed hidden when Min Jun took over, waiting for the right moment to act. That moment is now. Petra processed this information, trying to fit it into the picture forming in her mind. So you have allies. This Lee person. The men who were just here. How many more? Enough to take back what's mine. Maybe not enough to do it without bloodshed. And Min Jun? How many does he have? Jae-won's expression darkened. More. He's had 3 years to consolidate power. 3 years to buy loyalty with my money and threaten obedience with my weapons. He paused. But he made one mistake that I never would have made. What's that? He let himself be hated. Power through fear only works as long as you're the most frightening thing in the room. The moment someone more frightening comes along, all that fear turns into opportunity. And right now, Petra, I am the most frightening thing in Seoul. Before Petra could respond, one of the men from earlier appeared in the doorway. He was young, maybe late 20s, with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. Hyung, he said, using the Korean term for older brother. We have a problem. Jae-won didn't look away from Petra. What kind of problem? The kind that just pulled up outside with 30 armed men. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think is about to happen. Is Petra going to run or fight? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? The drama is just getting started. Jae-won moved before Petra could process what was happening. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a door she had always assumed led to a closet. Instead, it opened to reveal a hidden staircase leading down into darkness. Stay behind me, he ordered. No matter what happens, stay behind me. They descended quickly, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by thick concrete walls. At the bottom of the stairs was a room Petra had never known existed. Screens lined one wall, showing security footage from every angle of the property. On another wall hung an array of weapons that made her stomach drop. What is this place? She breathed. Insurance, Jae-won said. He grabbed a handgun from the wall and checked the clip with practiced efficiency. My father built this room when I was a child. He said that a man who doesn't prepare for war is a man who's already lost. On the screens, Petra could see black SUVs surrounding the mansion. Men poured out of them, armed and moving with military precision. Is that Min Jun? She asked, pointing to a figure stepping out of the lead vehicle. Jae-won's entire body went rigid. Yes. Petra studied the man on the screen. He looked nothing like Jae-won. Where Jae-won was tall and broad, Min Jun was lean and sharp. Where Jae-won radiated controlled power, Min Jun exuded chaos. Even through the grainy security footage, she could see the cruelty in his smile. He looks insane, she said. He is, Jae-won agreed. He always was. I just refused to see it until it was too late. On the screen, Min Jun raised a megaphone to his lips. His voice crackled through the external speakers, reaching them even in the bunker. Brother. Min Jun called out. I know you're in there. I have to say, I'm impressed. 3 years playing dead. That takes commitment. But the game is over now. Come out and face me like a man, or I'll burn this house to the ground with everyone inside. Jae-won's hand tightened around his gun. You can't go out there, Petra said quickly. That's exactly what he wants. He wants to kill you face to face. I know what he wants, Jae-won said. But he doesn't know what I want. And what do you want? Jae-won turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her blood run cold. Not anger. Not fear. Certainty. I want to look him in the eye when I take back everything he stole from me. Including the 3 years I should have spent loving you instead of pretending to be broken. The confession hit Petra like a physical blow. Jae-won. I should have told you sooner. I should have trusted you. But I was afraid that if you knew the truth about who I am and what I've done, you would leave. And losing you was the one thing I couldn't survive. Outside, Min Jun's voice echoed again. You have 5 minutes, brother. 5 minutes before I start killing everyone in that house one by one. Jae-won cupped Petra's face in his hands. I need you to do something for me. What? There's a tunnel at the back of this room. It leads to a parking structure 3 blocks from here. My men have a car waiting. I need you to take that tunnel and get as far away from here as possible. No. Jae-won's eyes widened. Petra. I said no. She grabbed his wrists, holding his hands against her face. I spent 3 years taking care of you when I thought you were helpless. You think I'm going to run away now that I know you can fight? You think I'm going to abandon you when you finally need me for something other than changing your sheets? This isn't a game. Min Jun will kill you without hesitation. He'll enjoy it. Then don't let him catch me. Petra stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. I told you last night that if I stayed, you couldn't lie to me anymore. Well, here's something I haven't been lying about for 3 years. I love you, Kang Jae-won. I've loved you since the first time you looked at me like I was something precious. I've loved you through every bath and every meal and every nightmare I thought you were having. And I'm not going to stop loving you just because things are getting dangerous. Jae-won stared at her like she had spoken in a language he didn't understand. Then, slowly, his expression transformed. The cold mask of the mafia boss cracked, and underneath it was the man she had fallen in love with. Vulnerable. Desperate. Completely and utterly hers. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was 3 years of restraint shattering all at once. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her against him with a hunger that stole her breath. She kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring every ounce of fear and frustration and love into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. If we survive this, Jae-won said roughly, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for every lie I told you. You better, Petra said. Starting with teaching me how to use one of those guns. Despite everything, Jae-won laughed. It was the first time she had ever heard him laugh freely, and the sound made her heart ache with how much she loved him. Stay close to me, he said, pressing a smaller handgun into her palm. And if anyone other than me gets too close, aim for center mass and don't hesitate. Petra looked at the weapon in her hand. It was heavier than she expected. More real than anything she had experienced in her carefully contained life as a caregiver. I won't hesitate, she promised. Jae-won led her back up the stairs, but instead of going toward the front of the house where Min Jun was waiting, he took her through a series of passages she had never known existed. The mansion, she realized, was built like a maze. Rooms within rooms. Exits within exits. The home of a family that had spent generations preparing for exactly this kind of siege. They emerged in a room on the east side of the house, where 3 of Jae-won's men were waiting with weapons drawn. Hyung, the young man from earlier said. Lee Sung-ho's men are in position. They'll hit Min Jun's flank the moment you give the signal. Tell them to wait, Jae-won said. I want to talk to my brother first. Jae-won, that's suicide, Petra said. It's strategy. Jae-won checked his weapon one more time. Min Jun's men are loyal to him out of fear. If they see me alive, if they see me standing strong, that fear will start to crack. Every soldier who hesitates is one less bullet we have to dodge. He looked at his men. Protect her with your lives. If anything happens to her, I will hold each of you personally responsible. The men bowed their heads. Understood, Hyung. Jae-won turned back to Petra. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Everything was in his eyes. The love. The fear. The desperate hope that they would both survive what was coming. Then he walked out the door. Petra watched on a tablet one of the men provided, streaming the security footage in real time. She saw Jae-won emerge from the front entrance of the mansion, hands at his sides, walking toward the army his brother had brought. Min Jun's smile faltered for just a moment when he saw Jae-won walking. Then it widened into something manic and unhinged. "Look at you," Min-jun called out. "The prodigal brother rises from the dead. Tell me, how long have you been able to walk? A year? 2. Long enough, Jae-won said. And in all that time, you never once tried to contact me? Never tried to take back what was yours? I have to admit, I'm disappointed. The Jae-won I remember would have burned the world down to get revenge. The Jae-won you remember didn't have anything worth living for. Now I do." Min-jun's eyes narrowed. "Ah yes. The black woman. Your little nurse. I've heard about her. Apparently you've been quite attached. Tell me, does she know what you are? Does she know about the men you've killed? The families you've destroyed? The blood on your hands that will never wash clean?" Petra's hands tightened on the tablet. "She knows everything," Jae-won said. "And she stayed anyway. That's the difference between you and me, Min-jun. I inspire loyalty. You only inspire fear." For the first time, something ugly flickered across Min-jun's face. Loyalty is weakness. Fear is power. Is that what you told yourself when you shot me in the back? That it was power? Jae-won took a step closer, and several of Min-jun's men shifted nervously. "You didn't face me, little brother. You waited until my back was turned and you pulled the trigger like a coward. And now, 3 years later, you're still hiding behind an army because you're too afraid to face me alone. I'm not afraid of you. Then prove it." Jae-won spread his arms wide. "Send your men away. Face me one-on-one. Let's settle this the way our father would have wanted." Min-jun laughed. "Our father was a fool who trusted the wrong son. I'm not going to make the same mistake." He raised his hand, signaling his men. "Kill him." Time seemed to slow down. The first shots rang out, but they didn't come from Min-jun's men. They came from behind them. From the rooftops. From the shadows. Lee Sun-ho's men had been waiting for this exact moment, and their attack was devastating. Chaos erupted. Min-jun's soldiers scrambled for cover, suddenly caught in a crossfire they hadn't anticipated. In the confusion, Jae-won moved with a speed that seemed impossible for a man who had spent 3 years in a wheelchair. He drew his weapon and fired, dropping 2 of the nearest men before they could react. On the tablet, Petra watched in horrified fascination. This was the man she loved. This was the man she had bathed and fed and cared for like a child. And he was terrifying. He was also magnificent. The battle was short but brutal. Min-jun's men, caught off guard and suddenly outnumbered, began to surrender in droves. Those who didn't were put down without mercy. Within minutes, what had seemed like an overwhelming force had been reduced to a handful of survivors kneeling on the ground with their hands behind their heads. And Min-jun was running. Jae-won chased after him, disappearing around the corner of the mansion. Petra was on her feet before she knew what she was doing, ignoring the shouts of the men who were supposed to protect her. She found them in the back garden, near the koi pond she had walked past 1,000 times. Min-jun had a knife pressed to his own throat, his eyes wild with panic as Jae-won advanced on him. "Stay back!" Min-jun screamed. "I'll do it. I'll kill myself before I let you have the satisfaction." "Go ahead," Jae-won said coldly. "Save me the trouble." "You don't mean that. You won't let your own brother die." Jae-won's laugh was devoid of warmth. "My brother died the night he put a bullet in my back. You're just the monster wearing his face." Min-jun's eyes darted past Jae-won and landed on Petra. A horrible smile spread across his face. "There she is. The woman who made you soft. Tell me, brother, what would you do if I killed her instead of myself?" Before Petra could react, Min-jun moved. The knife left his throat and flew toward her with deadly accuracy. Jae-won was faster. He threw himself in front of her, taking the knife in his shoulder instead of letting it find her heart. The impact sent him stumbling back into her arms, and she caught him, both of them crashing to the ground. Jae-won. Petra screamed. Min-jun ran. Or tried to. Lee Sung-ho's men were waiting. They caught him before he made it 10 feet, dragging him back and forcing him to his knees in front of his bleeding brother. Jae-won, stay with me. Petra pressed her hands against the wound, applying pressure with the skill of someone who had spent years training for exactly this. It's okay. It's not deep. You're going to be fine. Jae-won looked up at her, and despite the pain in his expression, he was smiling. You called me Jae-won. Not sir. Not patient. Just my name. You're delirious from blood loss. Probably. He reached up and touched her face with a bloody hand. But I'm also right. You called me by my name. Stop talking and let me work. She didn't let herself think about the chaos around them. The shouting men. The defeated army. The brother who was being held at gunpoint just yards away. She focused only on the wound, on the blood, on keeping the man she loved alive. When she was finally satisfied that the bleeding was under control, she looked up to find the entire scene waiting in silence. Waiting for Jae-won to tell them what to do with his brother. Jae-won rose slowly to his feet, Petra's hands still pressed against his shoulder. He walked toward Min-jun, who was no longer smiling. All the madness had drained from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like acceptance. Kill me, Min-jun said flatly. That's what you want, isn't it? That's what you've been planning for 3 years. Just do it and get it over with. Jae-won stared at his brother for a long moment. The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable. I'm not going to kill you, he said